A solo adventure to Morocco. Is crossing parts of the Sahara Desert on a 22-year-old motorcycle a good idea? Find out in this video. Let the adventure begin.
Welcome to Morocco!
Let's go! I take you on a 4-week spectacular and impressive motorcycle trip. COVID and some political disputes between Morocco and Europe made the entry impossible for a long time. However, in May 2022, a long-awaited opportunity opened up and entry to Morocco was finally possible again. My journey began in Sète, a small city in France. From here I took the ferry directly to Nador in Morocco. The crossing takes more than 40 hours and includes 2 nights on the Mediterranean Sea. The journey on the GNV ferry was much more pleasant than I expected. For me and my small 650 single cylinder, it was certainly the most pleasant way to arrive in Morocco. In France at the port, I met Amber and Victor, a couple from the Netherlands. 2 fellow adventure riders on their Royal Enfields exploring Morocco. We got along very well and our general route planning was almost identical. And so we set out to start our journey together. We were able to complete all our visa formalities and import our motorcycles already on the ferry. Customs officers were on the ship to make the entry into Morocco a breeze. Thus, we could leave the ferry and the port in Nador in the shortest time possible. On the first day, we organized Moroccan SIM cards for our smartphones and we withdrew our first dirhams at the ATM. Card payments are not very common in Morocco, so you should always have enough cash with you. Not far from the port, we spotted some Berber monkeys in the forest. After our first night in Nador, we traveled to the Tazekka National Park. For me, this national park is a secret gem. Hardly any tourists get lost in this beautiful area.
Salam alaikum.
The second night we spent with a small farmer family in the middle of nowhere. It is rare to experience such great hospitality. These farmers are completely self-sufficient. All vegetables and meat come from their own garden or from their own animals. The food was the most delicious food we had in all of Morocco. The next day we left the national park and drove further south. However, for the planned route we did not have enough gasoline in our tanks. A gas station was also not in sight. We had our full jerry cans with us, but we didn't want to overstretch the risk. So we decided to make a detour to refill our tanks. We learned very quickly what it means to drive on a small side road in Morocco. The off-road route was great fun and took us on an altitude of 2,200 meters.
Wow. Das ist ja mal der Oberknaller.
We liked the spot so much that we had to take a coffee break. The views were amazing. Drones are not allowed in Morocco, so my footage is mostly limited to shots while riding, with the endless amount of wind noise. After the 100-kilometer off-road detour, we finally arrived at a gas station. Unfortunately, the gasoline was empty here. But we were lucky. There was another gas station a little further down the road. The detour was worth it. In the same village, we met Izar and his small moped workshop. For roughly 10 euros, he offered to change my tires. I had brought the new studded tires from home. I was happy to finally get rid of all the extra weight on the back of my motorcycle. Once the tires were changed and our tanks were filled, we were ready to tackle the next stage. The 2,250 meter high gravel pass. All in all, no challenge. The detour to the gas station was much nicer. Furthermore, we had some temperature extremes on this day. From 35 degrees Celsius in the morning down to 12 degrees in the mountains. Rarely have I sweated and frozen so much on one day. The next day we started with a breakfast in the middle of nowhere. Victor and I used our adventure bikes to climb a small hill nearby. For now we enjoyed our last day together. Victor and Amber stop a little earlier today. I drive further south, where I sooner or later find the big sand dunes of Erg Chebbi. On the way there I see the first camels on the side of the road. Finally, I arrived in Merzouga and searched for a nice hotel with swimming pool. From here I could perfectly explore the big sand dunes. My first goal was to circle the entire sand dunes of Erg Chebbi. In doing so, I was able to gain my first experience in the sand dunes and see how the motorcycle behaves. A low tire pressure and a loose riding position is essential. Otherwise, something like this may happen. For the circumnavigation of the sand dunes, you should plan at least 2 to 3 hours. The whole route is about 60 kilometers in distance. Here you can approach the sand very well. If you ride closer to the dunes, the way is much more sandy. If you move away from the dunes, the path becomes rather rocky. On the east side of the dunes, where hardly any tourists find their way, you can see many camels and some nomads which have set up camp in the desert. At the Paradise Lookout I was invited for a mint tea by some very friendly Berbers. In the meantime, the temperatures climbed to more than 40 degrees Celsius. So I was happy to get back on the bike for a nice windy breeze to cool me down. Over time I felt more comfortable riding on sand. I controlled the motorcycle much better and rode much more relaxed. But that doesn't mean that I didn't get stuck a few times. So I still had to practice a lot more before I dared to go up the big sand dunes.
Okay.
After the exhausting circumnavigation of Erg Chebbi, I went back to the hotel and into the pool for a cool down. In the evening, I continued to practice my skills and slowly but surely dared to go further and further into the sand. The next morning I woke up at 6 a.m. to enjoy the sunrise and the majestic silence in the desert. Riding over the sand dunes and the sunrise in the morning are an absolute highlight of this trip. Spectacular and unforgettable. Nevertheless, I had to move on at some point. And so I set off, passing a truck that loaded its cargo tailor-made for this route. The next destination was the famous Todgha Gorge, as well as the Dadès Gorge. Both gorges are connected by an off-road pass with an altitude of 2,600 meters. A perfect adventure to escape the heat. When I arrived on Sunday evening, it felt like all of Morocco was on their feet to cool down in the Todgha Gorge. At the end of the gorge, I searched for a campsite. There I met two Frenchmen, father and son, on a 1250 GS and an Africa Twin. Them two wanted to ride the off-road pass between Todgha and Dadès Gorge. And so we set off together to cross the 2,600 meter high pass. Apart from one or another donkey blocking the road, this was probably the most dangerous situation during my entire trip. Only when it was too late, I noticed the excavator on the left side. From here, I could only accelerate and hope for the best, before I nearly got hit by the rocks. To our astonishment, we crossed the path together with some nomads and their animals. I did not expect camels up here at the altitude of 2,600 meters.
Merci beaucoup.
The pass was quickly overcome, mostly an easy to moderate gravel road. And so we arrived before afternoon in the Dadès Gorge, where we were greeted by some first-class motorcycle corners. I rode to Taghazout together with the Frenchman. There our ways separated. In Taghazout I found a wonderful campsite with outstanding service. Besides the usual welcoming mint tea, the owner offered to wash my dirty clothes, while I went to the pool for a cool down. When I returned, everything was cleaned and my laundry was hanging on the clothesline. The next morning I was treated with a fresh coffee and some omelette. And if that wasn't enough, they insisted on washing my bike and greasing my chain. I definitely noticed the long COVID break and the absence of any tourists. The locals try everything and use every chance to earn a small tip. They are definitely a bit pushy, but no one was ever rude to me. I also never felt threatened or harassed during the entire trip. After this great camp in Zagora, the next adventure was waiting for me. Today I went on the former Rally Dakar stages off-road through the desert. 160 kilometers along the Moroccan-Algerian border, passing the large sand dunes of Erg Chegaga and later riding on the dried up salt lake Iriki. This was the most strenuous and remote route of the entire trip. During my rides on Erg Chebbi in Merzouga, I was able to leave all luggage at the hotel. However, here on this ride I quickly found out that riding on sand with a fully loaded motorcycle is quite a bit more difficult and much more strenuous. And so it wasn't long before I had to drop the bike for the first time. Due to the fall, the left side luggage came off the motorcycle and was somewhat damaged. Fortunately, I was able to repair the case and continued the adventure after about 30 minutes. Far away from any civilization, I came across a small oasis. I took the opportunity for a short break and a freshly squeezed orange juice. In the afternoon, the temperatures climbed to over 43 degrees Celsius. And not only I started to sweat. Also, the motorcycle had to fight with the heat. The cooling fan was running non-stop. I'm glad that bike and biker survived the tour well. If you also want to tackle such an adventure through Morocco, I recommend the Morocco Overland book by Chris Scott. I made all my off-road route planning with this book.
Ai, ai, ai. Ah, stinkt die Kupplung.
After all this sand and some riverbed crossings, I was happy to arrive at the dried up salt lake Iriki. Here I can ride a little faster and finally cover some distance. The headwind gave bike and biker a long-awaited cooldown. The last 50 kilometers were on gravel road with big rocks. A quick check whether the left and also the right side case are still holding up. Finally, a few photos of the camels before the 160 kilometers off-road adventure comes to an end. The next day I started with a visit to Aït Benhaddou, an old and well-preserved village which has been used in many well-known blockbusters. However, after 2 weeks of riding through Morocco on my own, this place was much too crowded for me. So after a short visit, I continued my journey through the Moroccan outback. The landscape and the roads in Morocco never get boring. There is a surprise waiting behind every corner. Unfortunately, I had severe stomach cramps the following days. On some days I had to stop my trips and find a hotel to get some rest. The trip through the High Atlas via Marrakesh to Tafroud and then further to the Atlantic coast was scenically very beautiful, but with the stomach problems rather a torment. Thus, there is little footage from these days.
Okay, guys, let's get close to the source. Here we are a bit more.
In total, I had 4 weeks for this trip. 1 week was needed for the long approach and departure by ferry. 2 weeks I used to see as much as possible of Morocco and to ride some awesome off-road tracks. The third and final week I spent in a surf camp in Taghazout. Taghazout is located just a few kilometers from Agadir and easily accessible thanks to its international airport. Also, the stomach cramps continued to bother me. I enjoyed my time at the surf camp. And there was also a reunion with the Royal Enfield bikers Amber and Victor. They visited me at the Riad and we went surfing together for a day. From the surf camp, Victor, Amber and I rode together to the blue city of Chefchaouen, before finally arriving in Tanger, where we took the ferry back to Sète in France.
What are we doing today?
Dying. It's 6:30.
Let's go!
It's gonna do that.
Back in France, the 3 of us rode back home. Amber and Victor towards the Netherlands and myself towards Germany. A large part of it we were able to ride together. And so we happened to pass the Ardèche river in the south of France. We could not miss this opportunity and went for a breathtaking kayak tour. For the 31-kilometer long tour, an entire day is needed.
Oh no!
Well, that's a wrap. 4 weeks of traveling Morocco. I am back home. My bike and myself got through the trip very well. If you liked this documentary and if you liked the video, please give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions about the trip or about the bike, please leave me a comment. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.